Story 50. Years ago, my friend threw a durian tasting party. In case you don't know, durian is a polarizing fruit from Southeast Asia, known for their strong, pungent smell and acquired taste. Obviously, we're not having this party at my friend's apartment, as it will stink up her place. So we decided to have it on the rooftop of her building. Her building is adjacent to another building of the same height, so it's easy to go from one rooftop to another. When we got to the rooftop, we saw that people from the other building had a party the night before and dumped a lot of garbage on her rooftop. They also didn't clean up the rooftop, as many things from their party were still there, including uneaten pizza. We just took the garbage from her rooftop and moved it over to their rooftop next to their things. We went ahead and had our durian tasting party. Most people at our party hated it due to its taste and smell. During our party, these people from the adjacent building never came up at all to claim their stuff. As the party finished and we started to clean up, I noticed that the door to their building was open. I took all the durian shells and garbage, went into their building, and put them all next to their trash. I made sure to leave the bag open so that the smell could spread in their building. I'm not sure what happened after, but I hope whoever threw that party is more mindful of cleaning up their parties in the future. TLDR. People from an adjacent building decided to use a friend's rooftop as a garbage dump. They got it back with a side of stinky durian delivered inside their building. Story 51. Just heard this great PR this week. It happened to my geef's friend. Let's call her Betsy. Betsy, 55-ish, single, is in the process of moving into her father's nearby home. He recently moved to an assisted living facility. She is obsessed with getting incredible deals, discounts, and freebies, although sometimes it involves a bit of moral compromise. Betsy decided to have the house interior fully patched and painted before moving in with furniture and possessions. True to her nature, she hired an unlicensed handyman to do the work. Did I mention that Betsy has an entitled attitude and is never wrong about anything? She apparently gave the handyman a hard time during the painting project. So getting ready to move in after the paint all dried, Betsy was checking the rooms and figuring out furniture placement. She was looking at where to set up TVs and realized she couldn't find any cable outlets. She checked the other bedroom and living room, but still no cable outlets. Betsy slowly realized that there were cable outlets, and their disappearance may have something to do with the painting project. She confronted the handyman and asked if he covered up the cable outlets. He readily admitted it, saying, "You told me to." He was probably smiling when he said this. Now, nobody in their right mind would tell someone to cover up all of these outlets, especially for the house's wired system. She has no recourse at this point, and finding those outlets, drywalled/patched/sanded/painted over, is pretty much impossible. 52. I'm getting yelled at that this should be posted here instead. A few years ago, a good friend got me a job at the place he was working. I don't want to be too specific, but they dealt with large, rideable, gas-powered grass-murdering machines, and the pieces parts needed to repair them. Oh, and weed whackers. They'd recently started getting orders online, so they thought they could use an extra hand. The 5 people I'm working with have been doing this for years, so they know a ton about the machines they're sending parts for, as well as where the hell said parts are. So the first few days go pretty well. I'm doing my best to catalog this staggering number of bolts and screws and washers and gaskets and wheels, and Jesus, when there was downtime, I'd walk through the parts section to try to get my fucking bearings. After 3 days I'm starting to get it. I still have someone with me watching as I start to grasp it. Then it's like Thursday and there's nothing to do. OP, can you pull that stuff off and clean those shelves? Sure thing. I hate having nothing to do. People that stand around and talk or just wander. I'm checking the clock every 5 grams damn minutes. So then Friday, I'm told my hours might change, but I'm totally coming back. I get paid in cash for the week and am sent home. I wasn't called back. Seeing as it was my friend that got me the job, I'm like, what gives? They saw there was downtime with 3 people doing the same job, so sorry man, you're donezo. But don't feel bad, these 2 dudes trying to run this department act like 2 monkeys trying to fuck a football. There was one little thing though. I overheard one of the employees on a forklift bragging that, haha, I'm not even certified, but watch this. Okay, yeah, I was pretty pissed off, Sue. I was unemployed and drunk AAAND. Reported them to OSHA. OSHA tried to follow up with me, but I was like, ugh. I was just pissy and tipsy in the moment, it's whatever. I just found out. Me following up wasn't necessary. OSHA walks in, sees 2 forklifts, and nobody on site has a certification. They also had shit stacked way too high and a bunch of other infractions my buddy couldn't quite remember. All told, $18,000 fine, and they still have forklift certification peeps showing up. Fire me for dumb shit reasons? Fuck around and find out. Story 53. Obligatory. This happened several years ago, a few months after I had moved to Chicago. I had moved there from Romania, where I'd been living and going to school. Love Romania. People are great. Drop what you're doing and visit. Anyway, while I was there, due to my living situation, I had to learn the language fast and thoroughly. Not many people around me spoke English, outside of the uni I was at. So fast forward to the few months after I arrived in Chicago. Imagine my surprise when the driver of the Uber I had ordered appeared to have a Romanian name. The area had a lot of Eastern Europeans, so I guess it shouldn't have been so surprising. I was really excited to talk to him and make sure I wasn't getting rusty, maybe make a friend. Up pulls the guy, I get in, he greets me, but he appears to be on the phone with a buddy/family member, so I just sit quietly in the back, listening in a bit. The person on the other end asks if the driver is getting off work soon. He responded with something like the following: "No, I still have a few hours left, then I'll go home. Right now I have someone in the car. God, I hate this country. The women here are so fat and ugly. At least this one has a nice chest, but why can't she lose some weight?" And he goes on and on about all the problems with me and other American women. Now, I've always been a bit on the chonky side, and you best believe the Romanians love to comment on it, so I was used to it. But I was a bit shocked that this guy was going off like that. Anyway, I'm just kind of sitting bemused in the back seat as we near my destination. Then I tell him, in Romanian, with all my might trying to pull off the distinct accent of the region one had been living in, "Can you just pull over there, on the right?" I swear this guy's head. Did the Exorcist girl head move? And he turned a shade of red. I have seen nowhere else in nature. He didn't say anything, just pulled over. When I got out, I said thanks and added, "You're not attractive, and you're also fat, so maybe you shouldn't make comments like that." I have never again reached such levels of self-pride. Story 54. I was in my mid-20s. I was a supervisor in a small manufacturing company. We had maybe 8 to 10 people in the shop and 3 in the office. I was promoted a year earlier, and it wasn't a big deal. A little more pay, but way more grief. My coworkers became my subordinates. Envy, malice, and a whole lot of pushback. Space. My lunch was after everyone else, for various reasons, but mostly it was production related. We all brought our lunch and heated stuff up in the microwave. Time and time again I would go to have my lunch and it would be one half missing or gone. Lunch thieves are the worst lol. After I'd bitch and complain, things quieted down. Every once in a while things would go missing. I had had enough. I set a trap. I brought a bowl of stew/soup to work that had constipation meds in it. I'm not sure the amount I used, but it worked extremely well. I didn't have not one but 2 different culprits that shared in the act. It was a fight to see which person got TTO the single stall toilet. A ugly mess it was. Here is the other thing. One person was from the shop and the other was from the office. Disparate. They were admonished, but not before trying to find fault with what I had done. The owner wasn't having any of it, even with the knowledge that the office person was his brother. It gets better. About a year later, the guy who shit his pants from the shop staff set his food in the microwave and ran out of break room to check his machine. He was heating up buffalo wings. 6 or 8? I don't remember. Anyway, the pants-shitting office brother came into break room right when shop pants-shit guy's wings were done, and I was taking them out of the microwave to heat my lunch up. Office guy grabbed 2 wings off the plate. I said, "Hey, those aren't yours!" Exclamation mark. Quote. At that, he grabbed more and started eating them. Less than a couple of minutes later, shop shit guy came in and saw less than one half his lunch on the plate with office shit guy stuffing his face with wings. A bit of an argument erupted with me smiling ear to ear. Office guy stammered looking at me and said those wings were mine. I corrected him by saying, "No!" I said those wings weren't yours. Good times. Story 55. For context, I work in the medical field. I do biohazard sanitization and sterilization. We work for very big medical facilities, and although I can't go into the specifics of the work itself, just know that it's very important for things to be done in a tidy but convenient way, due to the sheer magnitude of orders we get for supplies to either be shipped or properly cleaned. This is very hard, very physically demanding and dangerous work. I've been working in this field for over 5 years now. I'm not perfect, but I definitely know how to be efficient and good at my job. And the number of employees that come through here only to quit is very high, just for the simple fact that it's so demanding and dangerous. Because of this, personality conflicts are bound to happen at some point. However, this one was something else, and hell-bent on making everything harder. The job basically works like this. Supplies come in, supplies get cleaned by the first crew, then placed in the machines to be sanitized. Second crew takes the sanitized materials and organizes them and/or packages them in a way specific to requirements of the supplies. Third crew takes the supplies, builds the order, sterilizes them, sends them out for delivery, completes the order. Sometimes we interchange, Sometimes we make adjustments, but that's the gist of it. I, at the time overseeing crews 2 and 3, was in charge of managing everything to make sure things were done properly and training new personnel. Enter OCD new hire. She was kind at first. We mingled. I trained her over the course of 2 weeks. Everything was fine, right up until I left her on her own. Now again, if something is not done specifically according to procedure, it throws everything out of sync to the point that we can be set back by hours. I gave her lists of what needs to be done and how to do it, along with my phone number in case she needed help and couldn't find me. Did she read the lists? No. Do it. Did she adhere to her training? No. Did she think to just ask someone about how something should be done and why? No, she did not. It started out as little things. Misplacing something and setting it on the wrong shelf, moving equipment into the wrong room, moving things out of our storage and not putting it back. It was little shit that I really didn't think anything about and just shrugged it off. And then I had to take a day off for medical leave. I came back to a disaster. We were 20 orders behind. Supplies weren't restocked. And not only was everything moved, but laid out in tiny individual stacks across all of the shelving, having been torn out of storage and just left in random places. One day, and we were screwed. I asked one of my coworkers what in the hell happened, and he said that because we were understaffed, nobody supervised the new hire and couldn't leave their posts, so she was doing all of this reorganizing while people were stuck and trying to do their jobs. I was furious, but tried to stay calm and confronted the new hire about the situation. Her only response was, "I'm OCD." I didn't want to be an ass and really didn't want to question her diagnosis, so I let it slide and began retraining her, explaining in great detail as to why you can't just do things how you think they should go, and you have to adhere to specific procedures. She then began arguing with me, saying how just putting things away after they're washed would produce mold, and I had to remind her that she's working on crews 2 and 3, and anything she touches could be licked and she'd be fine. There is no mold risk. However, she continued to argue, bringing up different excuses, and I had to excuse myself from the conversation. A week passes, and it's nothing but arguments. She misplaces something, I tell her not to. She orders something without authorization, I tell her to stop. She begins moving things out of storage, I tell her to put it back. In between, I'm having to clean up her messes, and I'm becoming exhausted because I'm trying to do my job while running my ass off, trying to stop her from setting back my team. Over time, she's getting progressively more angry with me, and then, out of nowhere, an employee pulls me aside and tells me something blindsided. This new hire had been going around telling people that I'm not only this mean and heartless person, but had been accusing me of being a fucking sex offender because I'm always looking at her. Like, no shit, I'm always watching you because you're always fucking up. This was the last straw for me. I called my boss, brought him down for a meeting, told him that if I hear anything about her spreading lies again, that I'm calling an attorney and I'm not putting up with her crap anymore. He agrees with me, and I begin my petty battle of revenge. So I let her reorganize, figuring I'm going to be running my ass off anyway, and instead of putting everything back where it goes, I place everything on our transportation carts in the biggest, most obnoxiously awkward boxes I could find. Because they're on carts, my crew could simply take the cart to where they need the supplies, so I was actually helping everyone's time while royal bakely pissing off this employee. Tiny marble-like balls? In a box. Laminated tags? In a box. Metal brackets? In a box. Large holding containers? On a cart. Box on top. Every single time she would reorganize and inconvenience everyone, it was going in a box. Tried to complain about it to management, however my boss basically said, "If it's bothering you, then take everything out and actually put it where it goes." She didn't dare try to talk to me about it, because she knew she was already on thin ice. So we went on like this for a good 2 months. She actually tried getting rid of all the boxes at one point, but I think she forgot that I was overseeing the crew, so I just ordered twice as many from our deliveries team. They were happy to accommodate the order. Eventually, she saw me starting to place other things in these oversized boxes like sticky notes and twist ties, and she threw her hands up in the air and literally walked out. The next day she was a no-show, and then she quit. I completely understand having mental health problems. I know how much of a struggle it is. But when you're doing a job like this, you have to find a way to do the job correctly and communicate instead of being an ass about it. Because the thing is, I have OCD too. Story 56. I posted this last year, or maybe the year before, and decided it should be told again because there aren't a lot of Christmas revenge stories. Several years ago, a friend of mine was sent by his wife to go and buy some Christmas cards that they would send to all their friends. He had never bought Christmas cards before, so he just bought a couple of packs of identical cards that he thought were nice. He returned home and his wife hated them. She told him they were hideous and sent him back to the store to buy different ones and return the ones he had bought. He bought new cards, but kept the old ones and hid them until the following year. The following October, he sent one of each of those cards to everyone. He received a Christmas card from the past year explaining he was pulling a prank on his wife and that to please use the enclosed card as their Christmas card to him and his wife. Mid-December, the cards started rolling in, all with cryptic messages about the card, hoping they liked the design, etc. Their mantelpiece was covered in identical cards from friends and family around the world. He didn't say anything. She thought it was a little odd, but commented how much she liked the design. Finally, at Christmas dinner, it got brought up in conversation by someone in on it, which included everyone in their circle. At that point, she knew something was up and wondered why everyone was laughing. My buddy told her about the prank. She claimed to have no recollection of sending him back to buy different cards and denied the whole thing. But later that night, she shot him a nasty look. They never spoke of it again. Story 57. A fun petty revenge story I think everyone would like. Seeing a lot of golden child stories on Reddit lately. Here is one from a childhood friend I know very well. I left a lot out because I like the revenge part, but it was a rough childhood. Its stats pretty much the same as a lot of the other stories. Greg was the firstborn to young parents, not sure on their ages but early 20s at the oldest, who at the start of his life didn't have much time for him. He was consistently at his grandparents' house. That's how we met. They lived close to us, and we would hang out all the time. When he was about 7, his parents had a girl named Jane, and right off the bat they told everyone this was the makeup kid, the kid who they were going to raise right. As they grew up, Greg was a solid student, had a great friend group, played sports growing up. We became good friends because we hung out in school and was always on my teams. I found out later in life that it's because my parents, being the good people they are, had actually paid for Greg to play some sports and he was on my teams because that was the only way he could get to games. He started working at 16, saved up everything, went to college. Then after completing college, transferred to university where he majored in software engineering and met his GF. Sarah graduated in chemical engineering. After school, they ended up getting good jobs and buying a condo. Jane, on the other hand, has been the typical spoiled child. She was barely passing high school when she needed to transfer after making false allegations that a teacher asked her on a date, and she rejected him. That's why he failed her. She has gotten into multiple car accidents, completely writing off 3 cars, still lives at home at the time of this story. She would have been 22, and their parents have paid for everything for her, from new computers to cars to fast food and vacations. What led up to this is for a couple years after Greg and Sarah had moved in together, Greg's parents would consistently ask him for loans. Being the bit of a pushover he is, he would often give them a few hundred here and there, then a couple times it would be as much as a few grand. It was a constant fight between him and Sarah. The cycle would be, his parents would ask, he would give and not tell Sarah. Sarah would find out and yell at him. He would try to stand up to his parents. Parents would give him the family helps family when times are tough, or blood is thicker than water lines, even though himself and Sarah knew it was because they were giving so much to his sister. Then something happened. Greg and Sarah found out that they were expecting their first child. This is where something must have clicked for Greg, and he realized that he now has a family he has to worry about. We were at the bar when this seemed to finally click in for him. It was fun to watch. He had already thought about cutting off his parents. This kind of made the decision for him, knowing he didn't want people like that in his kid's life. So with Sarah's approval, he decided to test their family should always help out family line in a pretty fun way. Well, in my opinion, he also wanted to see if he could get back at least some of the money he had given them. The two of them started looking for a house once they found out she was expecting, found a place they liked, and their offer was accepted. Once they had all the closing dates and information signed off, he called his parents. He told his parents he had lost his job and was on the verge of being homeless. He needed to come up with $5,000 or he would lose his condo and him and Sarah would be homeless. Of course, the excuses started to come out as to why they couldn't help him. If he is man enough to play house, he should be able to stand on his own 2 feet. I saw some of the message. It was like a sports interview with all the greatest hits. Greg expected all this, and he took it all well. To be honest, if his parents had given him the money, it probably would have been a far more interesting story. Sure, enough. The closing day approached. He tried a couple more times reaching out to his parents, dropping the number he needed all the way down to a couple hundred, and still no help. On the closing day, a bunch of us helped him move. His parents knew the date. He had told them he needed the money by such a date multiple times or he was going to lose the condo, and no one showed up to check on him, not even a phone call. After the move, he stopped messaging his parents altogether. He didn't block them because he was curious how long before anyone said anything. It took about 2 months. In that time, he got engaged when he got a confused message from his dad saying they tried to drop by his condo, probably needed something, and there was someone else living in his place. He simply replied, "Thank you for showing me how much family helps family. When times are tough, I hope Jane shows you the same support you show me when the time comes." From Greg, Sarah, my fiance, and soon-to-be daughter. Then he blocked them, and he hasn't reached out them since. Story 58. A long time ago, my dad worked as a postman in a Scottish town. There is a lot of churches in said town, and a healthy mixture of those are Protestant and Catholic. Two churches in particular had a rivalry that resulted in marching bands. If I remember rightly, one of these was referred to as the Orange March. For weeks in a row, the Orange Marching Band would walk up the middle of the road from their church to the opposing church. They always managed to time it for my dad trying to nap after his early morning shift, and he did not like being woken up. For weeks this went on, and my dad noticed something. This band would stop playing and hold position in the road every time they were interrupted. A car honking. They'd pause until the noise was gone. Then they'd pick up and continue. My dad, petty man that he was, got ready for them. My family had an old lawnmower, petrol-powered, and with an engine to shame a muscle car. He got that mower ready and waited and waited. And then he heard them, and boy was he suddenly excited about the Orange March for a change. When they began to slowly march past our house, he went to work. Yanked on that chain to get the mower roaring and thundering, and it was louder than anything the band could produce. They stopped in their tracks and waited. But my dad wanted to be thorough. Shades on and a big smile on his face. He went up and down again and again until this entire band was glaring their hatred into him. He waved. He finished. They started up the instruments again, and we had another garden to mow. My dad went to work, grinning ear to ear, cutting that grass and making sure to take his sweet time. After he finished, and they left, he took the best nap of his life. The next time they marched up a different street, and my dad got his sleep. Story 59. Not my story, but my dad's from years ago. My dad used to get the newspaper delivered every day. This was paid once a year for 365 days of service. Some days it wasn't delivered and he'd call customer service. If they had someone around, they'd deliver the paper later in the day. If they didn't want to, they would credit his account for one day of no paper. After a year, he gets the bill for the following year, and the date the subscription started was the same date as the prior year, which would mean they didn't give him any credit for the days they didn't deliver the paper. He calls customer service to ask about this, and they have no information on that, so he grabs his calendar and starts giving each date, the name of the person he spoke with, and what was said. They try to give him a song and dance to get off the phone, but he's retired and has all the time in the world. At some point, they transferred him to a supervisor who acknowledged that there were 2 weeks of missing newspapers, but claimed he had gotten credit for them. If I got credit, then the effective date of the new subscription would be 2 weeks from the start date listed, or you would be asking for payment for 50 weeks of paper delivery instead of 52. The SUPA asked, "How do you figure that's right?" I passed math in the first grade. They wouldn't do anything, so he decided to let the subscription go and didn't pay the bill. The newspaper kept delivering the paper every morning, although they hadn't received payment. 2 months of free newspapers. When they stopped, he called newspaper to set up a new subscription. Story 60. I was only the barista witness/messenger to this indirect customer interaction, but the memory has stuck with me to this day. I worked at a popular coffee chain with a busy drive-through. It was a sunny morning, the birds were chirping, and some asshole was laying on his horn in my drive-thru. Now, I never did figure out why he started. Maybe he thought she cut him off pulling in. Maybe she was too slow pulling forward. Maybe she took too long at the menu board. It didn't really matter. By the time she got to the drive-thru window, she was done with his shit, in the way a teacher or a mom might be, with a misbehaving, loud child. She was a put-together, middle-aged woman with a smooth gray bob. I told her the total, and she gave me her card and said, "I'd also like to pay for the gentleman behind me." We shared a smile. I'm sure you can imagine the looks on our faces. I got her on her merry way and he pulled up, red-faced and huffing. In my most cheerful customer service voice, I said, "The woman in front of you actually paid for your coffee. You don't have to give me anything." Y'all. His brain broke. He started questioning me. "What do you mean? Why can't I pay for the coffee? Just charge me for my coffee." I played along as best I could. Cheerful smile plastered across my face. "This coffee is all paid for, but I'd be happy to make you another one if you'd like to pay for something." With this by guy. We went in circles like this for a solid minute or two before he, even more pissed off than before, slammed on the gas and screeched his way out of the parking lot. I'm sure he went on to take out his misery on many more people that day. Her attitude had a big impact on me, and I carry it with me to this day when dealing with unpleasant people. many years and jobs later. Story 61. About a year ago, I worked at a student job with a main team consisting of young, sub-30 people, and everything went well until I started noticing that the team lead began pointing out mistakes that weren't even significant to mention, let alone to make a big deal out of. And while early on I tried to change up everything and he never had to ask something twice, I soon realized he was just looking for excuses to get me out of there. The last drop was when he held me accountable for a broom that fell over, and I quit on the spot. Time skip. I am organizing a D&D campaign, and one of the people interested is the team lead. I was like, you know what? I am adult enough not to hold it against him, so I obviously let him join. Well, he turned out to be just as good of a player as a team lead. He made sure to try to break any and every story element, split from group every turn, taking up half of the session time, and was genuinely a problem and bother to everyone in the group. So comes session 3, including campaign hook. He smashes the head of an NPC who was helping the party to the wall. The NPC reveals themselves to be a high-level mage and proceeds to obliterate him to the last molecule. Last time I saw or heard from him. Story 62. I, 24F at the time, had been good acquaintances with my nail tech of over 4 years. We will call her Stacy, 31F. In the beginning of 2022, she offered for me to move into her parents' old house with another client of hers and split rent. I've been wanting to move out for a while and thought it would be a perfect opportunity, as I would know my landlord to be her brother, that we will call Simon, 35M. As I was a week away from moving in, my mother passed away unexpectedly. I was devastated and had to take care of all of her assets and my father within less than 24 hours. It was a rough beginning of the year, but Stacy was there for me. At first, she would always check in on me and try to cheer me up with dinners and hangouts. We were becoming close, and I thought I was making a friend for life at this point. Oh, how wrong I was. 3 months after my mother passed, I had quit my job due to HR spreading rumors about my usage of PTO for grief. Story for another day. When I told Stacy, she offered me a job at the nail salon as a receptionist. I was excited to work at the place I went, to relax for manis and pedis, and hang out with my friend who would be my assistant manager. Things were great at first, and I even started making new friendships with others. I am still close with many of them to this day, but one of them, named Alice, 26F, was apparently going to buy new roommate in the fall as my previous roommate ended her lease early. Lots of drama there too. I've got so many side stories. Alice and I began to hang out outside of work, so we can learn more about each other since we would become roommates. Well, this made Stacy unhappy, and she began to stir drama. She would tell me lies about my coworkers, such as they talked bad about my weight, judging my boyfriend, backstabbing each other. Stacy told me so many things that I felt I couldn't trust anyone there for a while. But that changed when Stacy traveled abroad for a week and returned to work. Stacy informed Alice and me, literally 3 days before Alice was to move in, that she was also moving in, but not to live there, to open her own nail salon. Alice and I were confused. Like, where would the salon go? Stacy told us it would be in the back of the house, across from my bedroom. Alice and I were shocked and pissed off. Alice decided not to move in because of it, and I didn't blame her for it. But now I am stuck living across from a nail salon, and Stacy began to show some true colors, and her deceit began to surface. Alice talked with some of the other nail techs, and they told her that Stacy has done similar things before to receptionists. She would be nice to them at first, then alienate them from the other nail techs, because she wanted to manipulate the sales so she made more money. Then when the receptionist would find out, drama would unfold, and the issues would be blamed on the receptionist. I didn't want to believe it at first, but since she began to act suspicious with wanting to open a salon in the house I was renting in, which went against my lease, I began to move in the shadows and investigated. Stacy began to take things from the salon she claimed were hers without informing the owner. She has been friends with the owner, we will call him Nick, 34M, for over 11 years. So they were really close. However, Nick began reaching out to me directly because he was told I wasn't doing my job correctly. Of course, I asked him what was it that I wasn't doing, and he told me I was overcharging clients. I asked him what the prices were to everything. I played dumb and set them up. Stacy began changing the prices again, and I began taking screenshots and documenting. I also told him we were running out of certain supplies and told me that was impossible because he recently bought them. I told him that's what Stacy told me we needed, but then she would tell me that's not what she meant. Weird. Then the final straw happened. One day she asked me to take some boxes to her car and I agreed. I didn't know what was in the boxes until I placed them in her trunk. It was some waxing supplies like the waxing beads, sticks, wet wipes, etc. Also some rhinestones, special gel polishes, and other nail items. A week later, Alice tells me that Nick is investigating and missing supplies. Guess which supplies? Yep, you're correct. The ones I carried to her car. And yes, the supplies are at the house that I am renting, because that is where her new salon will be. And there are cameras in the salon. My heart dropped, and I knew that Stacy was trying to frame me like she did with previous receptionists. I was hurt because I thought she cared about me, but I had already gathered enough evidence, and it was time I came out of the shadows. Compiled a list of everything she had done for the past 3 months, from missing supplies, overcharging, stealing clients by referring them to her salon without an LLC, an expired license, defamation on current and previous employees, and text messages about her plans for her new salon, with a specific message saying she is doing this because Nick was a con artist. I texted Nick I needed to talk to him, and he set up a time for 3 days. I told Alice and all my other coworkers about it, and they said they would have my back if Nick asked them. Stacy came in the next day and tried to be sweet to me. I gave her a cold shoulder and told her, "I'll talk to you after work." She looked nervous but began working. Stacy asked me to meet her in the back of the salon towards the end of the day, and I did. She asked me what was wrong, and I told her I knew the supplies she asked me to take to her car were not hers, and Nick is investigating. I told her she has 3 days to tell Nick, or that I will. She told me she would, and for the next 3 days she called, texted, and even came to me at work to reassure me she took care of the situation. She even told me Nick already knows I took the supplies, and I don't even need to talk to him, but I still did. Nick arrives, and Stacy didn't show up to work. Nick asks, "Where is Stacy?" And I told him, "Avoiding you because she has been deceiving you." I told him everything and showed him the evidence. He looked pained and told me, "This isn't the first time Stacy has done something to hurt my business, but this has gone too far." He told me I should not renew my lease, wasn't planning to, and that he will be talking to Stacy about all of this. He asked if it was okay if he mentioned me, and I told him I wanted her to know it was me. That night, Stacy blew up my phone calling me a liar and asking how could I betray her for everything she did for me. I told her yes, she did a lot for me, but that doesn't make it okay to frame me for theft. She tried to tell me it was hers, and I sent her the screenshots of receipts that it was under Nick's card. She then said I have been brainwashed by the other nail techs and that they've been out to get her since day one. She texted a lot of nonsense, but I just kept mentioning the theft and told her this is over. She said she would tell Simon to not renew my lease, and I told her I wasn't planning on it anyways. Fast forward a week, Nick texts me that I need to change the passwords from the system and to take Stacy out. He was changing the locks and access codes to everything because he fired Stacy. He thanked me for my honesty and told me I am temporary assistant manager. But I left 2 months after to go back into my field of psychology. I moved in with my now husband. Alice and I are best friends now, and Stacy apparently lost a lot of her clients due to her ethics and overcharging. She also lost a lot of friends and had to work outside of being a nail tech to make ends meet. And that's my petty revenge story. Sorry it was long, but it was a lot. Story 63. A long time ago, I was a quiet, nerdy teenager with 2 little brothers. By the cruelty of fate, Mother Nature gifted those 2 little gremlins, the faces of angels, but the minds of the most deranged demons. Years of schemes, false accusations, and teaming up against me to make my life a living hell. I was the only witness of all the scams, the shenanigans, pranks, and lies they used. Like Cassandra, I was cursed to utter only truth, but never to be believed. I tried to warn everyone but remained the only one blamed for their actions. Those cruel creatures had no shame. One would suddenly burst into tears, accusing me of violence while I was minding my own business, and the other would testify to my mum, also blaming me for the broken vase I never even touched. Parody of justice, I was never offered a fair trial, directly judged and condemned without mercy. Every time I told them, "One day, brothers, one day I will have my revenge." A few years ago, one of my brothers became the proud daddy of the 2 sweetest and beautiful little girls in the world. I became a proud uncle, and I finally had everything at my disposal to have my revenge. For years now, I'm secretly teaching my nieces the subtle art of messing with their dad. All the tips and tricks my brothers once used, all the pranks, tomfoolery, scams, and how to get away with it, they will know. Oh, brother, witness your fate, betrayed by your own blood. I'm pretty sure my sister-in-law is suspecting me, but for now she never said anything. I think she enjoyed it a little bit, so I told the nieces to spare mom and focus on driving daddy insane. I better have the in-law on my side. That's 1 brother down, 1 to go. I can't wait for the other to have kids too. More soldiers in my army. I warned you, brothers. It's time to pay. Story 64. I go to sports bars quite often to watch games and eat basic bar food. At most of the bars I go to, they have a machine on the wall where you can spend $1 to purchase a song from Apple Music, and play it across the entire facility. On the Apple Music Store, there's a song called Tubular Bells Part 2. It's possibly the most rage-inducing song I've ever heard, if you would even call it a song. I have no clue how it ended up on Apple Music, but I definitely use this fact to my advantage. It's basically just some dude jamming on random instruments. It's not terrible, but the song has no real rhythm it's trying to get into, and no specific beat it's trying to build off. It's like the beginning of a Pink Floyd song that just constantly builds up, and the second you think he, or she, is gonna get into rhythm or start jamming out, they either change instruments entirely or restart and continue playing different chords. It quite literally will drive you nuts if you're forced to listen to it. And the best part is it's 26 minutes long. I've been at a few bars where there was no way for the bartender or waiter to cancel the song out without flipping the break or powering the sound system to reboot it. I've stuck around a few times to see everyone suffer, but the last few times I've done it, I've immediately left as to not blow my cover. Last month, I went to a pretty large chain sports bar that I won't name and got absolutely terrible service. Food was bad. Server came to refill our beers once in over an hour, and we had to go to the bar a few times to top off. And to make the matter worse, we got kicked out of our table after an hour and a half because apparently our table was reserved for a specific time for a ball game that came on soon. No big deal though, I get it, so we just moved to the bar. I was a bit frustrated as I'd been to this place many times before and we usually get much better service. I wasn't mad or anything, but I was annoyed enough where I decided I was going to make everyone's ears bleed for a little while before they shut the music system down to play the ball game on the sound system across the restaurant. Seeing the visible confusion and frustration across everyone's face across the entire bar is a good way to make an okay night great. To those of you who frequent bars and restaurants with the music box on the wall, you're welcome. Story 65. About 10 years ago, my bestie at the time, Chloe Hunt, became my worstie. For brevity, I'll refer to her as K Hunt henceforth. One day back then, K Hunt abused me for being selfish and dropped me like a hot potato. I admit, I didn't really consider K Hunt's needs at the time, but only because I was experiencing a series of successive traumatic life events. I thought K Hunt might have cut me some slack. It had only been a couple of weeks since the really bad things had happened, and I had supported K Hunt many times, over many years, through all kinds of things. This was the first time in our entire friendship that everything wasn't all about her. I could have used her support for a change. But no, K Hunt had always been kind of a jerk to other people. Never to me, but deep down, I knew one day my turn would come. So it wasn't exactly surprising or out of character, but it was still extremely hurtful. When K Hunt was in my face yelling at me, it felt like I had left my body and was watching it happen to me. I later learned that this is a form of disassociation. Because I was at a bit of a breaking point already, I couldn't deal with her on top of everything else. I was in shock and didn't know what to say, so I apologized. When the dust had settled and I came up for air, I realized I had been blocked. Nice! Anyway, I got over it, kind of, and moved on, mostly, with the least amount of anger and bitterness I could manage, which was a lot. Fast forward a few years, she got in touch to apologize. She said she made a huge mistake and had regretted it ever since. She wondered if we could be friends again, because I was always such a good friend to her. Bitch, I know! I'm glad you finally realized. But no, we cannot be friends again. Sorry. Not sorry, because I am not a doormat, and while friendships don't have to be equal, they at least need to be reciprocal. Fast forward another few years, K Hunt got a mutual friend to sound me out and see if I'd be receptive to hearing from her. Inwardly, I rolled my eyes so hard I could see backwards through time. It had been at least 6 years at that point. What the hell was K Hunt thinking? Outwardly, I said, oh sure, absolutely, it's been so long it's all water under the bridge now. I decided I would say all the things I never got to say. Rip shreds off her. Tell her exactly what a Chloe Hunt she had been. So K Hunt contacted me and said her pathetic spiel. She asked how I had been. Absolutely fantastic, I said. I was ready to let her have it. But then she went on to say what a difficult time she had been having. Her husband left her. She had been diagnosed with BPD. She was made redundant. Her kid was troubled. All of my anger evaporated as I realized that the universe had a greater plan. For me. For K Hunt. For both of us. I picked up the Uno reverse card. I gently laid it down. I said, wow, that all sounds very difficult. I hope you have some support with that. All the best, K Hunt. And hung up and blocked her number. And yes, if you were wondering, everybody did clap. K Hunt, if you're reading this, I would never wish you or anyone any harm. But if you stubbed your toe a lot, or a boisterous, muddy dog jumped on you every time you wore white, Or, when you went to IKEA to buy more of something you already have, it was discontinued? Or if the number for your local pizza place was one digit different from yours, and you got a heckin' lot of calls late at night from confused stoners? I would not be sad. Story 66. This is one of my favorite stories about my ex-husband. We lived on a dead-end street full of duplexes, a cemetery, and a small canal that fills during the wet seasons. PNW. We were one of two neighbors that had a dog. There's scent time. The other dog owner would let his dog off leash and freely poop in the other neighbor's yards and not pick it up. One day that property's landlady came over to yell at me for the poop on her tenants' yards. I was shocked. I assured it wasn't my dog, always leashed or in our backyard. After my ex-husband came home from work, I told him about the confrontation. He told me to go pick up all our dog's poop from the backyard in a trash bag. I did and handed a full bag. He immediately took it to the dog owner's front door and dumped the entire contents out. That guy picked up his dog's shit from then on. Also, same neighbors chopped their tree down and placed it at the end of our street canal and blocked the flow of water and started to flood our street. My ex-husband, powerhouse, heavyweight championship wrestler, unclogged the canal, took their tree and shoved it as far and as hard as he could under their car's carriage so they couldn't reverse. Oh, privilege of being a tough asshole. Even years after our divorce, when I run into a problem with men who only listen to other men, I give him a call. He's the asshole you don't fuck with. He's a serious guy. I love telling this story. Story 67. I had a rude manager after putting up with very slow service. When my family got at a well-known Mexican chain, Chi-Chi, which had since gone out of business in USA, although you can still get their salsa in stores today, we were seated and the waitress got the drink order. Then we waited and waited and waited. Almost 15 minutes before she showed up with the menu and somehow forgot the frickin' drinks. I should point out at the time the restaurant was probably less than 1/4 full, and I could see 3 more other waitresses/waiters, so it's not like they were busy. She promised to bring the drink and wanted the order, but we just got the menu and weren't ready. Another 15 or 20 minutes waiting and she showed up to take the order. And guess what? No drink again! After taking the order, she said she'd be right back with the drink. She got the drink, but it was all wrong. My 2 sons can't have beer as they were minor, and I can't have alcohol due to medications I take. RRGGH. Ever. The food showed up cold, as it had been waiting for a long while. And I still never got my drinks. We left a very small tip of $5 on top of $60 bill, minus cost of drink, because she forgot again when she bought the damn bill. We were out by the car when the manager caught up to me demanding to know who I shortchanged her on tip. I apologized and took the $5 bill from him, explained that she kept forgetting the drink, took a long time to give us menu, took a long time to get the order, kept forgetting the drink, served the meals cold, still forgot the drink. And now I got a rude manager who thought customer was screwing his waitress rather than consider maybe his waitress was the problem. You can tell her she gets a 0 for tip. Banned from the restaurant for life, which was maybe 3 months before most closed permanently, including the local Chi-Chi, with lazy waitresses and rude manager. TLDR waitress, kept forgetting drink, very slow in a not busy restaurant, and got upset with tiny tip. Rude manager made it worse. No wonder the restaurant went out of business. Not sure of exact cause, but rude staff can kill restaurant. 68. This happened in the early 1990s. My ex-boyfriend, we'll call him Shane, managed a fast food establishment, the one with the arches. My friend and I were hanging out, munching on fries, just waiting for him to finish his workday. Back then, the drive-thru employee wore a headset, and the manager also wore one so they could hear everything happening, and they could talk to staff and take orders as needed. The employee on the drive-thru that night was newer, like her second night on the drive-thru. It was almost closing time, and a car pulls up, filled with a group of guys there. They were acting obnoxious, talking over each other, yelling, and being rude to the employee, asking her if she was stupid when she asked them to repeat themselves. One guy ended the order with, "Make sure to put extra pfeff, #King Pickles." The employee looks ready to cry. Shane heard all this and cut into intercom to say, "No problem, sir. Please pull up to the window." Cue petty revenge. Shane helps prepping the order until he gets to the burger needing extra pfeff, #King Pickles. He dips the patty in pickle juice. He adds a huge stack of pickles, thicker than the patty. He then pours pickle juice into the bun. He wraps it up. It was dripping. Puts it in the bag, and heads to the window. Guys are still being obnoxious and loud. My ex handed them the food and stated, "Enjoy those extra F times #King Pickles, sir." Smirk firmly in place. Overhearing all this, we were on the floor laughing hysterically. He said they never came back again, rolling on the floor laughing. Story 69. I put bully in quotes because it only happened once. On to the story. I, minor, F, was sitting on the floor in gym class. We were going to play volleyball, and the teacher was announcing the teams. Suddenly I hear my name behind me, so I listen. If I have my name on my team, I'm going to kill myself. I turn around and stare at the person who said that. Wrong. My name, she said. Her friend supported her and followed up with, yeah. She was talking about her neighbor. Her name is my name. Two problems with this. One, my name is not a normal English name, and I'm pretty sure I'm the only one with my name in this school. Two, why would your neighbor be on your team? There is no one person with my name in this class. One, look at the girl. What is your name? I ask. My name. She responds. Yes. She goes silent. Tell me your name. I can tell that this isn't going anywhere, so I turn to the person on my side. We used to be friends, so I'm comfortable talking with them. Do you know her name? They responded, no, and ask why. So I tell them what happened. The gym teacher starts calling out the teams, and I realize I can find out her name this way. Obviously, the only logical thing to do is stare at her and wait for her to react to one of the names. As I wait for her name to get called, the people next to her are called up. She scoots over to someone I recognize. I hear the name of the person I recognize called. Then I hear the name Izzy called. Fake name. They smile at each and walk over to their group. When my name is called, I go over to the teacher and ask to go the counselor's office. I'm gone for the rest of the class. Next block, my old friend comes up to me and tells me that her name is Izzy and that she overheard her telling her friends that she would lie if she gets pulled into the counselor's office. I thank them. Next class in gym, we went outside because it wasn't that cold. I see Izzy playing with her friends while I sit there alone. What am I doing wrong? I think, why does a mean person get have friends? As my brain typically does, it comes up with a scenario where I get Izzy to apologize to me. I urge to go up to her. It's like an itch. I stand up and my legs start walking forward. I'm doing it. I see her coming closer to me. I stop when she's right in front of me. I call out her name, Izzy. What? Apologize. For what? You know why? Huh? You know what you did. She gives in and says, sorry. I'm sorry. I'm not satisfied. Her voice is insincere. Say it like you mean it. Once again, she says, I'm sorry. What are you sorry for? I ask, craving more. I'm sorry for being mean to you. How were you mean to me? I'm sorry because I said if I'd want to die. It wasn't the full thing, but I figured it was all I was going to get. Thank you, I stated, and walked off. Later, thought of all the things I could have said to make it feel better, like pushing her to say the full thing, or telling her that I don't forgive her. I decide that I'm satisfied and leave it there. When I'm leaving my last class of the day, I see Izzy waiting outside the door, probably for a friend. When I see her, I become nervous. I then remember what I did. I become filled with triumph. I felt so small against her, but she needed to know that I wouldn't let it go. It was affecting me when she was the one who said it. It felt like I was a bee stinging her. A bug so small and insignificant causing pain. Except I don't think I'm a bee. It didn't kill me. I'm more like a wasp, still having venom left to hurt. TLDR. I forced my bully to apologize and admit what she did. Story 70. So to preface this story comes secondhand from my deceased mom, as I was not born yet when this occurred. So back at the late 70s, early 80s, my parents were building a condo development on a somewhat rural island in the PNW. My dad was the developer, and my mom would help out with random handyman tasks. They had cats. One was a long-furred cat that liked to roam. It got used to the island while they stayed there, and when they had to move, it would not come out of the woods. They drove back multiple times to coax it back so they could take it with them where they moved. Finally, it emerged from the woods, with completely matted fur and having lost pounds. My mother collected the cat and of course took her to the vet to get checked up. Because of all the sap in her fur, the vet decided to give her a lion cut for grooming. Full fur around the face, toes, and the end of the tail. Everything else was shaved bare. The vet brought the cat out, and my mom burst out laughing. How can you not? According to her, she couldn't stop laughing the whole way home. Don't ask me why. But once the cat was in the car, my mom let her out of the carrier. They made it all the way home. The cat liked to chill on the dashboard while she was driving. They pull in, and the neighbors can see the cat from their deck overlooking the driveway and start laughing, which sets my mom off again. This cat stands up on the dashboard, looks at my mom, then pisses into the car's dashboard air vents. My mom said the cat never forgave her and pissed/shit in only her shoes until it died. Story 71. This incident actually happened back in the early 90s with my bestie Brent at the time. We were co-workers at American Express. not making much money, but enjoying perks of being in the travel industry. For context, Brent was gay, and I'm a straight female, so we frequently laughed about both of us being attracted to men. He was renting a small house and acquired a roommate for a while. The roommate turned out to be a freeloading loser who not only didn't honor paying his share of the bills, but also ran up a huge phone bill due to calling sleazy 1 to 900 numbers. Does anyone remember those? Before widely available internet, etc. Anyway, he refused to pay for the large debt that he created, so Brent told him that he needed to move out. The roommate stormed out, leaving all his possessions there. Brent filed suit against him in small claims court and won. As they were leaving the courthouse, the roommate told Brent, "I'm not paying you anything, and you can't keep my stuff either." Brent didn't keep his stuff. He had a big garage sale, selling all of the roommate's possessions, clothes, electronics, etc., and ended up making much more money from that than what he was entitled to from the court case. Story 72. TLDR at end. My first post. This happened decades ago. ESO, before the age of piss discs. After graduating Navy boot camp, I was assigned to a 3-man room to attend advanced training. As the least senior, thus the booter moniker, in the room, by 2 whole weeks, I endured annoying hazing by one of my 2 roommates. I attended night classes, so was on a different schedule than them. I would return to find my pants tied in knots around piping at the ceiling about 15 feet up. I had to get a ladder to get them down. That type of annoying crap. The worst roomie got his orders and had to have his sea bags packed to show that his lockers were cleaned out as he ran around getting paperwork signed. I was alone with his sea bags. I pulled near all of his clothes out and put my boot camp issued sewing kit to use. Now, I stitched shirt cuffs shut, collars so he couldn't fit his head through, spots in the middle of his socks, pant legs, t-shirts, buttons so they wouldn't unbutton, skeevies right through the middle, and both summer and winter uniforms. I then folded everything up and placed them as they were back in his sea bags. He would have been thousands of miles away before he would even realize and then potentially deal with it over several months. I'm sure he had suspicions, but I left no note and never spoke a word until I had transferred as well. One of my favorite Navy stories, and I get a smile every time I think about that asshole wondering WTF? TLDR. Bully in Navy gets his uniform sewn in a variety of annoying ways as payback. Story 73. My sister and mother are very close, and I am somewhat comparatively less close. When my wife and I were looking for a place to live a number of years ago, we were considering options within our very modest budget. My sister and her husband had bought a home in 2011, and they were doing great. My mother had purchased her new home in 2014, and it was also nice. By the time we were shopping, things had gone up in cost quite a bit. When my wife and I showed my mother and my sister what we were excited about, they both scoffed and agreed together that we simply didn't like nice things like they did. It hurt. The why-who. The reason why I was excited to move to a home less nice than theirs was because I was doing it with my spouse, who I love. I also lived outside the United States in the poor parts of Mexico for a couple of years. And I'll tell you, Americans have it nice. None of our options included dirt floors. Also, Mexicans that do live that way aren't necessarily less happy. But I digress. The years went by, and my wife and I were able to afford a much nicer home than anyone else in the family. My mother and sister were over for a visit. My mom was gushing over the house, and my sister had nothing much to say. I smiled and said wistfully, "Well, Mom, this place isn't much, but some people don't like nice things." I can't remember if I winked or not, but for the sake of the story, let's say I did. Story 74. In high school in the late 70s, yes, they allowed 16-year-olds to drive buses in North Carolina. I was driving the bus, and there were 2 neighborhood bullies sitting behind me. They were threatening me. One of them said he was going to beat me up, maybe kill me, while the other held me. I had seen them in action, and wasn't altogether convinced they weren't serious about killing me. There were about 20 high school kids on the bus. Yes. I said, "You guys want to beat me up?" Yes. As soon as we reached the end of the route, they lived in my neighborhood. I said, "How about now? You'll have an audience." They said, "Okay." I pulled the bus over and opened the door. I bent down as if shutting down the bus and putting my things away. They got off the bus. I shut the door and drove off. I'm sure I broke a rule there, but man, the laughter from the other kids on the bus and look on their faces was so totally worth it. Small victories. Story 75. This happened about 15 years ago, but it is still one of my favorite stories. My stepfather was a cruel man. He never wanted kids, which was no big deal to me as I was 18 and at college when he married my mother. But my sister was 13 and had to live through years of his emotional abuse. He blamed us for everything and yelled whenever anything wasn't exactly his way. It drove a wedge between my mother and myself and my sister. And long story short, After 18 years, she finally left him. He was away on a week-long trip when we moved all of her stuff out of the house. We took only what Age had paid for, as she did not want anything he had purchased for her or built her. He was a finished carpenter. My mom had purchased all the high-quality items: dishes, cookware, bedding, plush towels. That's important later. She left behind all the bachelor crap he purchased prior to their marriage, which was low quality, threadbare, and just ugly. She also purchased all the food, so she took all of that. My sister and I were sent back in to make sure we didn't forget anything, and I decided, as Mom had always bought all of the groceries and paper products, that we should take the toilet paper out of every closet and all 3 bathrooms, even of the rollers. We found out later from my mother's attorney, our stepfather returned home from his trip with a bad case of diarrhea and went to the downstairs bathroom only to find no toilet paper. He went to the 2 upstairs bathrooms, and guess what? The same thing. He ended up destroying 2 bathrooms and multiple old crusty towels before even realizing more was missing from the house than toilet paper. Mom was peeved for a bit, but my sister and I thought it was more than appropriate for all the poop he gave her and my mother over the years. Story 76. I'm not the one who acted, but I love this story so much I had to share. Many years ago, I was casually dating this guy I'll call Tom. At the time, I had a big, black adopted dog that I think was mixed with Great Dane. Tom would come to my house and tell my dog that he didn't like mixed breed dogs. I told him to leave my dog alone, and he always said he was joking and didn't mean it. I wasn't really into this guy, so I didn't think it would last much longer. One day, he was over and told my dog he was ugly mixed breed. I told him that was enough. I was about to tell him I wasn't interested in dating him further, but I noticed my dog acting funny. He casually strolled over to his food bowl and inhaled it all. Then, he drank his entire water bowl. He went to the backyard and proceeded to run around with zoomies for about 10 minutes. I thought this was strange and so not like his behavior. Tom was sitting at my kitchen table, and my dog comes in, walks directly up to him, and vomits all of his food and water on Tom's lap. It was awesome. I looked at Tom and told him my dog and I have decided it was time for him to leave and not to come back. Best dog ever! Just to note, my dogs and I always come as a package. He had been known to have a dry sense of humor, so I wasn't sure in the beginning if he was really joking. But if I would have cut him loose sooner, he would have never had this awesome learning moment. Story 77. When I was 11, my mom had this friend that was really annoying around his 40s, and he had a job interview around where we live. And they were in a high school friend group together, so she just let him stay in our guest room for 4 days while he went to the interviews and all that work stuff. I still talk here and there now on Facebook, but she even finds him annoying. At the time, we had a cat, Nancy, and our 2 dogs. Our dogs have always been allowed on the couch. Now, they are pretty tiny, and we just don't care. But whenever this guy came over, he would try to boss me and my animals around all the time, with pushing them off the couch pretty harshly, and even made weird, unwanted comments to my mom that she would get upset at. Being 11, I took advantage of his stay with us, with torture. He had to wake up at 6 a.m. one morning, so the night before, I kept sneaking out my bedroom window and making his car alarm go off every 20 to 30 minutes for about 3 hours. He thought someone was trying to break into his car, so he spent half the night awake. Then I found out he was allergic to cats, not deathly. And I know this is evil, but I was 11 and didn't think just a kid being dumb. But he had this stupid bucket hat, so I cut some of my cat Nancy's hair and sprinkled some in his hat and rubbed her all over his pillow in his guest room. The next day he had terrible allergies. His eyes were red and he was all itchy and had to go home 2 days early. And that wasn't enough. I made a hate page dedicated to Dave with all my friends where we would find weird pictures of him from Facebook and upload them to an old Instagram account calling it Escape Dave. I would share the ACC, but I can't find it anywhere now. Damn, I was an evil kid. So worth it. Story 78. This petty revenge was enacted against me when I broke up with my then-girlfriend around 20 years ago. I was breaking up with my girlfriend and she was not very happy about it. She was screaming and hitting at the same time as she was packing her bag with all her belongings. The problem was that I couldn't get her to leave, and this was happening over a couple of hours. At one point, she had to go to the bathroom, and that's when I took my chance and hid her bag in my closet. When she came out of the bathroom, I told her I dropped her bag out the window, and when she stormed out, I opened the window and waited for her to come out. When I saw her, I told her I would put her bag outside my door, which I did, and locked the door behind me. After that, I sat down on my couch and watched TV. She came up again and started kicking on my door and screaming. After a while, I heard my letterbox bang, and after a while, she left. When I went out to check, all I found was a little piece of paper. When I picked it up, it was my "No advertising, please." She had ripped it off. And for many a month, I got a lot of advertising in my letterbox. Touché to her. Excellently petty. Story 79. I was in a very long relationship that ended quite suddenly. A few months later, I had a proper rebound fling with a guy we will call Mark. Mark was in a grad program, and we would often go out with his colleagues. At the time, he was living with several people from the program, so they were often around here. He was in a very male-dominated field, but there was one girl in the program, we will call her Terry. Terry was often at these large group events. She was intentionally very rude to me and would belittle me in front of the group. Mark never stood up for me, but other guys in the program would often tell her to back off or chill out. I confronted Mark about it, and he admitted that she has confessed her feelings to him after he had told her how wonderful our first date was. He told me that he had rejected her firmly, wanted to be with me, and did not think she was pretty. Throughout the rest of our short-lived relationship, he would repeatedly tell me how ugly/psycho/stupid she was. Flash forward a few years later, Mark and I are completely separate on social media, but a few of his roommates still follow me. One got married last week, and who was in the wedding photos? But Terry and Mark, the newly engaged couple. I have sent them the KitchenAid mixer from their wedding registry, engraved so that it is not returnable and has little resale value. With a personalized note, "Mark, I'm so glad you could get over your hang-ups about Terry. All my love, Betty." Yes, of course. I chose the KitchenAid because it would sit on their counter every day. It's not so much that they are together, but more that he lied to me repeatedly, and that he has vocalized repeatedly how ugly he thinks his fiancée is. She treated me like crap, and he told me he thought she was a piece of crap. I guess they deserve each other. Story 80. Hi y'all. Please excuse my bad English. I am not very smart. So to start this story, you need some background information. Me, 16, and my mom, 35, haven't been getting along. It's clear we both have some mental issues, and while I'm getting help, she has not. So sometimes she can be really mean and say stuff like, "I'm weird," or threatening to kick me in the head because I talk back. Well, I'm not one to argue at all. So when I need to release some anger, I change her contact from like mommy to M. I still know it's her. This in a way just gives me a way to push back when I'm upset and not directly fight with her. Recently she found out, and she gave me the silent treatment for a few days, and I was playing games on the iPad. My siblings and I share it's connected to her phone. So while I'm playing, she texts me and I respond. And my contact comes up on the iPad as oldest, which I know she changed recently because it was not oldest last weekend, and she found out Thursday. So I changed my contact back to petty bitch. I know I'm not in the right, but I've been fighting with my mom for a few years and I can't wait to move out. I just don't have anyone I can tell this, because no one believes me when I talk about how mean she is. Story 81. I was a semi-professional baker when I met hubby. Not because I tried to be, but because every weekend friends or family would pay me to make cakes, pies, cookies. My specialties are cheesecakes and cakes with surprises in them. After moving to his hometown, right before our first Xmas here, I had already gotten all the ingredients for an Xmas cake that was all of our favorite, and was telling his sisters how excited I was to make this cake, and how the farmer I found had some of the best fruits I'd ever seen. They told me not to bother, and they'd get store-bought. They do this with a lot of things. Only with me, though, if one of their friends offers to bring the same thing they've already turned me down for, it would be rude to refuse. Y'all, the bought cake was rock hard and awful. The kids literally made fun of it and asked if we could saw it into bricks to make a bread brick house. Fast forward a few years, and my husband bragged about my baking to so many people that my semi-pro kitchen in back to rolling along. We watch my SIL's kids, and they bake with me sometimes. We still always get the same store-bought Xmas cake for the family get-together. No one eats it. Yesterday the family was together for a situation regarding my parents-in-law, so we decided to hash out the Xmas plans. We're hosting, so I said I would take care of all the food, and they can bring dessert. The oldest kid kicked up immediately, complaining why we have to get that AWFL cake every year, and why couldn't I make something for dessert too? My husband responded immediately, telling kiddos that her mom and auntie prefer the cake from the store. Kiddo looked at her mom, then her aunt, then her mom, back to my husband and said, "Well, they can't even cook. They shouldn't get to pick what we have to eat." But I shut her down and said that they really like that cake, and that we needed to respect the traditions that make them feel more at home. My true petty revenge is planting the seed of anti-exclusionary traditionalism in their offspring. But I'm making that kid whatever cake she wants next time we watch her for that wicked burn. Story 82. Not me, but my son. He was 28 at the time and married to a total loon. Needy, moody, tried to isolate him from us. He did everything he could to make her happy. Then she admitted to having an affair. Only reason she told him is she got herpes. So he kicked her out. Only reason the day the movers came to get her stuff, my son's friend came over to act as a buffer. My son stayed out of the way as they loaded up her boxes, bookshelves, and bed frame. The friend offered to help dismantle the furniture so she could get out faster. When it was all done, the friend went to my son and said, "I'm proud of you. You didn't get mad or cause a scene. You deserve a reward. Hold out your hand." My son held out his hand, and the friend dumped in an assortment of hardware: screws, bolts, nuts, washers, and so on. The friend said that as he took the furniture apart, he'd pocket some of the hardware so she wouldn't be able to reassemble them. The shelves wouldn't attach in the bookshelf. The bed frame had just enough hardware to hold the shape, but not enough to support a mattress. The springs in the futon weren't attached to anything, so if you sat down, you'd fall straight through. He also poked pinholes in her cleaning supplies, so they'd leak very slowly, unless they got squeezed, in which case they'd really leak. Did that with her bottles of syrup, vinegar, cooking oil, etc. Guaranteed mess. Finally, the piece de resistance. He poked a hole in her diaphragm that he found in a box of her clothes. Edit. Lots of people commented about the diaphragm. The friend was very angry about how my son had been hurt and just acted. Not excusing him, but he was pissed. When he confessed to my son all he did, my son laughed because she had stopped using the diaphragm months before and had gotten an IUD, so it was pointless. Story 83. Longtime indulger of Reddit topics via YouTube, and this happened earlier today, and it was my first chance of petty revenge, which I am all too eager to share as soon as I got home. It was petty revenge, more for another person, but it still works. I work at a petrol station / convenience shop here in the UK, and the day was going on as usual. With me behind the till, I was serving a small line of customers, chatting to a nice lady, when I hear a series of very angry honking from outside. Through the rain, I can see a pair of cars waiting to pull into a fuel pump, one behind the other, and the one at the end of the two-car queue was an older man constantly honking at the car in front of him, a younger lady who had stopped a small distance behind the car currently at the pump, clearly to give the person room to pull out and leave, as some people like to back up a few feet when leaving to give room to turn away from a pump. This gap is important to the story. Me and the friendly lady I was serving have a laugh about how people lay on the horn when they get impatient, even if they have just pulled into a fuel station, and then I am glad I don't drive. I look back outside, and the car driven by the older man had pulled to the side of the lady he was honking at. I didn't think much of it, because nearly every fuel pump was occupied, so he probably decided to queue at the pump next to her in a gambit to try and save some sort of time. This fuel station is quite small, so there's not a lot of room to move if you decide to try and go for a different pump. My colleague serves the customer who the two cars had been waiting on, and I noticed the customer the honking old man was waiting for was still shopping. I chuckle and think to myself, bad choice, buddy. If he hadn't moved, both cars would pull into the two available spots and this story wouldn't have happened. But I was wrong. I look outside, and, as the customer leaves, the younger lady begins to pull forward into the free spot. Then I freeze, as the old man suddenly jolts forward in his car in front of the lady, almost hitting her as he swerves in front of her and into the second free space, and the lady pulls in behind. I see them get out of their cars, and the older man is waving his arms and clearly looking angry. I like to solve problems quickly, so I told my colleague what was going on and went to go sort it out. The queue was short, and the customers were understanding of the delay. I step outside, where I can see the old man having a go at the lady while she was filling up for not being closer to the car that was parked at the pump, so I just stride over and go, "Excuse me, is something the matter here?" The old man immediately backs up, saying, "Oh, we're just chatting like adults. I'm a civilized adult, she's a civilized adult, and the like," while the lady was saying, "Oh, he was just apologizing for what happened," even if it wasn't the case. From what I heard, the lady clearly looked stressed and tired, so I explained that I heard the honking and saw the man waving his arms, so I came out to investigate. I waited around until the lady finished and I returned to the shop with her, where she thanked me. The old man eventually filled up as I went back to the till. And here comes the petty revenge. The pair did their shopping and, once again, the lady is right in front of the old man in the queue. When it comes to her turn to be served, it would have been my colleague who would have served her, but I interjected, saying, "Oh, let me serve her. I think she'll like this." The lady gave me a smile but was clearly curious, while the old man goes to my colleague. As I ring up her products and fuel, I say to her, "I am sorry for what happened. As a token of compensation, let me give you this." This had the intended effect of the old man looking at me. I grab something from behind the till, and with my eyes locked into those of the old man, I say, A free coupon which takes off 5 pence off your purchase for every liter of fuel you put in. This old man's left eye was literally twitching as I grinned at him, and I scanned the coupon, taking off a grand total of 60 pence. Clearly not a lot was put in, but then again, it was a small car. The lady was very pleased and wished me a good evening as she left, and when the old man left, he just stared at me as he walked past, in which I gave a small, cheeky wave. I told my colleagues and they all loved it. A good night for good people overall. Story 84. I walked out of my bank's building into a crammed parking lot that is always full. Getting a spot in it is just luck. As I opened the door to my car, I saw a guy in a truck pull in the north entrance. I was parked just about mid-line between the north and south entrances. I had a few things to take care of before I intended to leave. I no sooner started my car when I heard honk. In my peripheral vision, I see the truck that pulled in sitting stationary about 5 feet before my parking spot. I ignore. HHOOOONKKK. HHOOONKKKK. Oh, here we go, I thought to myself. I never budged. Now, after the third set of honks in under a minute, I decided I was digging in. Just as I was about to get stubborn, I see a little Toyota pull in the south entrance and turn down my lane. I immediately reversed out and squeezed, on an angle, between the truck's front end and the other parking spaces opposite of mine. This gave the truck nowhere to go. I waved the OL gal into my parking spot. She had to come in on an angle, so it took her a couple attempts to straighten out her car in my old spot. All the while, Mr. in the truck was losing his shit. The elderly lady got out of her car and started to walk across in front of me toward the bank. I could hear truck driver yelling over the HHOOOONKS. She approached my window, thanked me, and made comment about anger issue guy. I laughed and told her to have a nice day. As she straightened up from leaning into my window, I see the arthritic hand raise the middle finger as she shoved her fist into the air in the general direction of Mr. Honky Truck. Glorious. Edit. Didn't want anyone losing their shit. Story 85. I bought a house in a nice neighborhood, partly because it didn't have an HOA. The real estate agent I used told me, after I signed the contract to purchase, that the seller had told her that the next-door neighbor was a pain in the ass. I found that out the day we moved in. We got to the new house about 10 minutes before the moving van arrived, and the neighbor was out there trying to talk to me as it was pulling in. He wanted to tell me the way things worked in the neighborhood. I told him we could talk about it later, but he stayed there, trying to talk to me as I was directing the movers while they unloaded the truck. Eventually, I went into the house, and he was right behind me, but I told him not to come in. He stood on the edge of his yard watching everything when the truck was unloaded. I stayed inside, and eventually he returned to his house. When I came out to move my car so the movers could get out, he cornered me again. He had all kinds of rules. He left for work at 5 a.m., and he expected no noise of any kind after 8 p.m. The previous owners were lax about yard care, in his opinion, and he expected that I would correct that. My mailbox needed to be moved farther away from his property line. I put up with half an hour of this, until I finally told him I had to go back inside to start putting things away. He was waiting for me or my wife with sort of complaint almost every day. Listening to him, I was pretty sure that he was coming over before I got home to do an inspection. Now, after a couple weeks of non-stop bitching, I had had enough. My wife and I planned things out. Just before I went to bed, I hit the panic button on the remote to my car. The alarm went off, and even though I could have stopped it with the fob from inside, I walked out and shut it off a couple minutes later. He was waiting for me after work the next day and complained to me that the alarm woke him up. I did the same thing every 2 or 3 nights. The first couple times he was waiting for me when I got home from work to complain. I told him I suspected someone was trying to break in to my car and was going to buy a couple cameras to monitor that side of my house. His house was close to my driveway, and he told me that surveillance cameras were not allowed, that it would be an invasion of his privacy, and he would take me to court if I were to put up cameras. Dad told me he was coming over, so I replaced the outside light fixture on his side of my house with a motion detector. The guy at Home Depot told me that 300 to 500 lumens were the recommended brightness. I could test the light with an app on my phone. After installing it, I bought 2 floodlights from an online sporting goods store that were made to light a sport field. They were 42,000 lumens each, and when they lit up, it was much brighter than daylight in my yard and on the side of his house. Bright enough to play baseball and hit a fastball at night. The alarm on my car stopped going off, but the lights would come on at random times when there was an intruder. When he went out to his car in the morning, it became daylight. He complained at first, but I simply told him that I was securing my property. Eventually, he put up some sort of blackout shutters on his bedroom windows. The whining became very infrequent, especially when I, being a good neighbor, changed the timer setting on the lights so that they weren't lighting up when he left his house. Story 86. Back in the day, I worked at a Pizza Hut in the middle of BFE. The manager was a complete ass and kept putting me on dishes. Exclusively. Exactly not why I started working there. I didn't mind doing that once in a while, but I got damn tired of going home at the end of the night, soaked with sore fingers from handling hot dishes all night. After a few months of this, I decided that every night I worked dishes, I would straighten a fork. Might as well have a little fun. After a few weeks, wait staff started to notice. What started as a, that's weird, became an interesting hunt for normal forks, combined with conversations about, that's so weird that straight forks would get sent to us on the truck. The staff didn't really care. It made their nights not quite so routine, and every once in a while they would try to figure out why there were so many straight forks. Slowly, ever so slowly, the number of straight forks grew to the point that they resigned to just giving them out. They did mention it to management, but the manager didn't care at all. They were there just to make a paycheck and treat people like shit, and told them to use them anyway, I don't care. Yes, they literally said that. At some point, the wait staff started trying to guess which tables would be fine with it, and which would complain. Have you ever thought about how awkward it would be eating from a fork that was straight? I tried it one evening. It's annoying. Anyway, they were eventually giving out more straight forks than normal ones. Until one evening, one table asked for normal forks. The waitress just said that, they come that way, we haven't curved them yet. At some point, I don't remember how long it took, an area manager of some kind stopped in and noticed all of the straight forks. I wasn't there that night, but he raised an absolute shitstorm and rained that down on the manager. It turns out that that manager was doing some other really shady shit that was discovered when the area manager decided, well, if she's making everyone eat with straight forks, then she must not care, so she can't possibly be doing her job right, and started looking around. What they found was apparently bad enough that the people working that night were effectively told, don't tell anyone else about this. The manager was replaced the same night as the straight forks, and I got to work other positions, since more people were hired because we were apparently seriously understaffed. I never found out what all happened, but everyone was a lot happier. Story 87. My boss was loved by everyone. She was given the opportunity for an early retirement and jumped on it. Her replacement, Art, was from another branch of the company, and he quickly replaced one of his direct reports with a guy, Denton, from his previous branch. He then named the Denton as his deputy in an unofficial capacity. Even though we were all equals, the new guy acted as if all of us worked for him now. He was an asshole, and we all disliked him greatly, but he had immunity from everything because the boss loved him. He delegated everything, took credit for all that went well, and criticized all that didn't. I had an office chair that I had used for years. It was comfortable, and I could move it easily in my cubicle between the bookshelves and my desk. Well, one day, Denton appropriated it. When I protested, he responded by saying it belonged to the company, not me, and since he had just been moved to an office from a lowly cubicle, it was necessary. Art did not want to be bothered with the dispute. I had replaced the chair casters a few months earlier. The new casters had a slightly longer pin inside the legs of the chair, and they raised it up about a half-inch. I stayed late one night, went into his office, and replaced the front casters on his appropriated chair with two of the old ones. You couldn't tell by looking at the chair, but the seat was slightly higher in the back than the front. Denton was constantly twitching and having to slide back in his chair because his bottom would slowly migrate toward the front. I told two other coworkers, who disliked Denton, what I had done, and every time one of us had to sit across his desk after being summoned to discuss something, we smiled inside seeing his discomfort, and then would report back to the others. I left the company about a year later, and would get the occasional call from the two who were still there about Denton's constant repositioning. Story 88. When I was 16, I was working on getting my driver's license, so I had 2 weeks of driving lessons. Upon meeting my driving instructor, the first thing he said was, "Oh, a lovely young lady like you shouldn't be wearing dark lipstick, you should wear a red one next time." Not even a hello or nice to meet you, he just went right ahead and policed me on lipstick color. Didn't know that was part of learning how to drive. The next day, I followed his unsolicited advice and wore a bright red lipstick. He immediately said that was much better and looked all smug. The next few driving lessons were mostly okay, aside from him at one point being way too hung up on how I could even grip the steering wheel with how many rings I was wearing that day. It was 15, but it's not like they were on my knuckles. Sheesh them. Then the last driving lesson came. Thank God this guy had been blabbing my ear off about tennis and Ed Sheeran. And like I had planned from the moment he first commented on my lipstick, I wore the black one again to be petty, and it worked. He was very clearly irritated, sighed, and said, "Come on, we talked about this. Why are you wearing the black lipstick again?" Not a super petty story, but I still remember how peeved that guy was, so it's definitely a fond memory, haha. Story 89. When I was in middle school, I really looked up to these two guys who were a grade above me. They were cool skater kids, but I was nerdy and wanted to be like them. When I'd try to hang out with them, they'd be complete assholes, call me names, poser, loser, and make racist remarks. Fast forward to my senior year in high school. They had graduated a year prior, and I ran into them at a New Year's Eve party. They were still friends. I had grown bigger and taller than them at that point, and they almost didn't recognize me. They were happy to see me. I just acted like none of the bullying ever happened, started catching up on life, and towards the end I said, "Sorry if I ever did anything to you, annoy you guys in the past. I honestly just thought you guys were cool and saw you as role models." Those dudes legit broke down crying in front of all their friends. And I just smiled and hugged them and said, "It's all good. I'm just glad we're all homies." I never felt so powerful in my life. Tears of joy. Story 90. For the last 25 years, December 26th has been a red-letter day. I was the manager of Fleet Feet Sports, an athletic shoe company, in Carson City, Nevada. My track coach was co-owner, and I got my job as a senior in high school. He sadly passed, and I continued all of my duties, including purchasing, hiring, and doing all of the marketing and advertising. I was promised I would be able to buy the store by the partner, now sole owner. That is, until a previous employee fell into quite a bit of money and bought it. He saw my value, and I immediately got a $200 a week raise and 1 weekend off a month. I continued my duties as if the new, much younger owner didn't even have to be there. I didn't mind much, as he and his wife took full credit for Small Business of the Year 3 months after they bought it. I had started Vendor of the Month, where we highlighted a smaller vendor like eTonic, and we all got t-shirts or polos and a pair of shoes. I also had created relationships with 3 to 4 of the local podiatrists and assured them we were trained in the different types of feet and had the knowledge to match them up with the right footwear. I established a good, better, best way of selling and would quickly explain why the shoe in the full-page ad was not the right shoe, nor was the most expensive, always the best choice. I also wrote columns for the newspaper and was friends with TV and radio. We also had a large running club, the Jackalopes, and put on at least 6 charity road races a year. The owner recruited his best buddy to become the manager and immediately gave me a $200 per week cut in pay. Is that even legal? Asterisk. I was told B***. Asterisk was now my boss, but I stayed out of loyalty to my customers. They would disappear for 3 to 4 hour lunches and come back after leaving me shorthanded that afternoon. I was assured all is great the week before Christmas at our end-of-year recap. We had a 25% increase in sales and 20% profit under mostly my watch. I got applauded at our small Christmas party the week before and a nice Christmas bonus. It is now 25 years later, but I remember this like it was yesterday. I went in early on December 26th, as I knew it would be a busy day with exchanges. The owner greeted me at the door and said, "I won't need you today." Now, I gave him a puzzled look and he said, "I won't need you after that. I'm letting you go." My heart sunk like a kid. He wanted my key right then and there and disappeared and said, "B times asterisk will watch you clean out your desk." I was stunned, and my girlfriend was shocked when I told her the news. I spiraled into a very deep and dark depression that still haunts me today. I celebrated Y2K full of despair and late. I vowed to never work for someone again and started 2 businesses of my own. I was told I didn't have a leg to stand on, as Nevada is a right-to-work state. I was told by the state of Nevada that I was late several times. It turns out I was late because I was taking/picking up my mom, who was fighting cancer, to her chemotherapy. The infusions would sometimes take longer, and it would be a quick 20-minute trip to take her home. We never got breaks. OR got a lunch half per hour. I went in early to prep for opening and was at most there a minute before opening. I had the last laugh though. He had no idea I had a Rolodex with over 200 customers' names and phone numbers. I'd mail birthday cards and let them know if a brand they loved was on sale or if new items were coming in. I spent the next 2 weeks calling them just to let them know I was no longer there. I said nothing other than I was no longer there. I was offered at least a dozen other jobs. Many said they'd just simply now go to Reno as they thought I was the owner. All of the company's sales reps all said, "Has T times asterisk lost his mind? You ran that place like you owned it." He then made many bad, illogical decisions I advised him not to take and sold his failing business 2 years later. Now, none of the major brands like Nike, Tiger, and Adidas were in the store, as he was on credit hold or lost the lines due to non-payment. It limped along for 2 more years after he pawned it off to his unsuspecting victim and his wife. It was a pale shadow of what it once was. He got divorced and moved away. Story 91. Back in the day, I was an IT manager for a design group for 25 years. The group designed integrated circuits, a bunch of very smart people. It also takes smarts to keep the computers, networks, and design software running for 400 people. My job. At least once a year, we'd get a new college grad in who made my life hard with their demands. I gave them 3 months to get settled in and get normalized. Less time for trying to make me look bad to their boss for ridiculous demands. One specific newbie outdid himself, and at the 3-month mark, one flatly told him he'd reached my limit of patience and to run everything by his boss before asking for anything else. Hardware, software, how-tos, hand-holding. After that, the boss would CC me on his responses, which were mostly no, or ask one of the more experienced designers to show you. I walked by a few times where he was complaining and getting laughed at by his more experienced teammates. It took about 9 more months before he pretty much humbled himself and apologized to me. It was very satisfying. We became friends and he's had a lot of great design successes. Story 92. Many years ago, when manufacturing was big in our area, my husband worked as the warehouse/shipping supervisor at a small manufacturer. Now, keep in mind, computers were mostly for business, and printers still ran reports on green and white striped paper at the time. Label making on a printer was still a big deal, because just a few years before, all the shipping labels were written by hand. You still had to input into the program the size of the labels and alignment, and he was the only one in the warehouse who knew how to work the shipping label printer. One day, hubby had just had enough of the people running the company treating him like crap and found a new job. When he put in his notice, he told the plant manager, let's call him Bob, that he really should assign someone to learn to work the label printer, even if they weren't going to replace him right away. Bob blows him off, and hubby drops it. Bob comes back less than an hour later and tells him the company is ending his employment effective immediately. Cool beans. He stops at the new company on the way home, and they agree to start him 3 days later. Before hubby gets home, Bob's left a message on our answering machine demanding to be called back. Nobody can figure out the label maker. Instead of calling Bob back, hubby lets his secretary, me, handle it. Right as Bob is scheduled to be leaving for the day, I called to negotiate terms. I offered that hubby would come back on a short-term basis for $100 an hour to train someone. We both thought this was a good joke, but nothing more. Turns out they really were desperate, and Bob would run it by the owners to make sure it wasn't possible. By now, Bob's 15 minutes late getting off work. Surprisingly, Bob calls back right away with a counteroffer. They would pay $15 an hour, slightly more than hubby's usual wage. I tell Bob I'm not willing to accept that, but I'll run it by hubby. 10 minutes later, I call Bob back with an offer of $90 an hour. This goes back and forth for over an hour. Meanwhile, hubby is busting a gut laughing every time I hang up on Bob. Finally, we agreed to $35 an hour, with a 2-hour minimum, because they desperately need labels for the next day. Hubby went in and spent less than 1/2 hour teaching Bob how to work the label maker. Best $70 ever. Edit to add, Bob had labeled me the secretary when hubby and I married. Story 93. TLDR. Passive-aggressive bully at work questioned how everyone does their job, so I did mine and blocked her access. I work an office job in charge of finance for a European company. There's this mean single woman reaching her 50s at work that always feels the need and privilege to judge everyone else. Her judging ranges from anything to how people do their jobs, their personal life choices, and even their personality and what they wear. The economy has been tough recently, and pressure is high within the team, and this has manifested into lots of friction and complaints in all directions, mostly coming from her. One of the many complaints directed at me was that I wasn't protecting our sensitive data enough, saving our monthly reports in a shared drive for others to access. It has been this way for decades before I joined, and no one was any issues with it, with the said sensitive data often printed out and stuck on walls anyway. Normally I just ignore the complaints and carry on my work, as both me and my boss are good at ignoring noisy complaints with no reasoning behind. But this time I decided to maliciously comply, and now have set unique passwords for each and every file with remotely sensitive data. Now, not only does she need to keep track of all the passwords I've set, she also now has no access to some data that me and my boss decided was no longer appropriate for her to see, including what budget we have for some of her operating expenses, and now require proof of said costs. Otherwise, that budget is gone. Story 94. I actually have 2 stories, both belonging to my mother because she is the undefeated champion of petty retaliation. The first one is pretty simple and not related to the title. Some backstory for this. She had a pretty rough childhood and ended up living on her own from a pretty young age. She met my dad at 18 and had me at 20. When she found out she was pregnant, she told her family, because even though their relationship was strained, she always wanted to try and have that connection. And at the time, I would have been the first grandchild. Unfortunately, My grandfather is not a great person and decided that instead of congratulating her or being happy to have a new addition to the family, he would send her a check to cover the exact cost of an abortion at the time, with a note that read, "Do the right thing." My mother, badass that she is, cashed the check, bought diapers with it, and mailed him back the receipt. Now for the second story, and the one that relates to the title. My parents always wanted a big family, with lots of brothers and sisters for me. Unfortunately, I was a miracle baby. After many doctor's appointments and tests, my mom was finally given the news when I was around 8 years old that she wouldn't be able to have any more children without major surgery. The news obviously devastated her, and while she was mourning, my other grandfather, not the same one from the first story, haha, who means well but does not always think things through before they exit his mouth, decided to cheer my mom up, somehow, by mentioning that she should just get a dog. Yikes. Well, my mother decided, you know what, that's a great idea. See, at the time, we still lived with my grandparents. So my mom went out and found the biggest, most obnoxious breed she could find on short notice and brought him home. Black Lab/Chow mix. And don't worry, despite being a revenge dog, he was very well loved and possibly the best dog I've ever had. Suffice to say, my grandfather was surprised Pikachu, and they got into a fight about it, at which point my mom reminded him that this is exactly what he told her to do. He stopped bringing it up after that. Lol. Probably not very interesting, but I love this sub, and I wanted to share some of the absolute maldad things my mother has done. Tears of joy. Edit. I found a picture for dog tags. I'm not sure how to add it to the post though. I'm mostly a lurker and don't know too much about posting stuff like this cold sweat smile. Story 95. This happened when I was 6. I had a cousin, who we will call Nicky, who was 5, and he was staying with us for the weekend. We were going to go to watch Frozen, as it had just come out in theaters, and when I was ready, I could not find my shoes, because Nicky decided to hide them. Me and my dad spent 20 minutes tearing up the house and couldn't find them. Nick Gary then revealed that he put them in the bottom of the laundry hamper to mess with me, and we arrived at the movie late. I wasn't gonna let this slide. My cousin was very obsessed with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and I mean obsessed, specifically Donatello. He had a Donatello figure that he was very attached to, and would freak out if he didn't know where it was. We had a house rule that we were not allowed to bring any toys into the bathroom, so he left the figure in the living room when he went to go to the bathroom. I instantly had the idea to snatch Donatello and put him in the back of the freezer. When he got back, he obviously started to cry. We, save for me, helped him search for it for 4 hours, and he was going to leave soon. My dad was doing everything in his power to calm him down, while I was grinning on the inside. I then decided that I had my fun and pulled the figurine out of the freezer, and he went home. I got grounded afterwards. To this day, I am very proud of myself for doing this. 96. In my job, I split time between a computer lab and a cubicle. My cube is in a small office room with about 4 other cubes. The woman in the cube next to me likes playing music, not quietly, while atonally humming along. I've never heard someone whose voice can technically be not loud but also piercing, in a screeching/hum howling way. She's been here so long that she's managed to claim 2 cubes against a wall, essentially giving her an office larger than my boss's actual office. Anytime she turns her music/screeching on, I immediately turn on my music, and I just love 80s and 90s punk. It actually helps me, as I can zone out and concentrate better, but I never turn it on unless she does. I also set a volume that is necessary to drown out her music. It's not subtle. Grimace. Sadly, there's no revenge yet. I just can't believe no one has said something to me about it. Rolling on the floor, laughing. Story 97. So we have this group which makes fun of a teacher from our school. Around 10 of us, they normalized making inappropriate jokes and stuff. So I had a friend who was a very toxic person, porn addict, so difficulty talking to girls naturally. In school he'd act saint and outside would treat others poorly, and he's, well, ugly to put it frankly. So much so that he's asked out every girl from our school and gotten rejected. He asked out my BSF and she was upset. To cover up, he used my name, saying I suggested that she liked him. I never did, which affected our friendship. Every time he was rejected, he'd send me paragraphs on paragraphs of sad texts, playing victim, etc. There was a new girl who he asked out, and she also rejected him, and he sent me the SS. I did occasionally encourage him to continue communication with her before rejection, thinking it would help him overcome this stuff. It didn't, and he again sent those sad paragraphs. Well, after that, he started insulting me like shit, especially in front of other students and teachers. I tried to speak to him a lot, but nothing worked, so I threatened him with S sharing. He took it lightly until I had enough today and sent it on the group. He got made fun of. Then he played victim and blamed me for sharing it, and they well kicked me out of the group. Sadly, they think it's my fault, and I can't care less knowing his truth is out. So yeah, he can't report to the school, since school doesn't take responsibility of actions done outside premises, so that's a safe spot. TLDR tries to ruin my image. I expose his ugly love life. Story 98. I don't know what she was thinking. Today at work the microwave died, so I went quickly to the bar next to my work to get something to eat. I came back, ate, and forgot to take my wallet out of the kitchen. It wasn't until probably an hour after eating that a colleague, let's call her Stella, said with a smile on her lips if I had forgotten my wallet. That's when I remembered. I was already about to thank her for reminding me when she said that someone had thrown it in the garbage. I panicked. All my documents, tickets, and payment cards were there. Now, as it turned out, it continued to lie on the table. All of it. No one steals at our place, so I wasn't afraid for the contents. I went back annoyed with it. She was still smiling, as well as laughing. I didn't say anything. I hid the wallet in my purse and sat back down at the computer. I thought to myself, wait, you'll want something from me, you'll see. As it turned out, I did not have to wait long. A few minutes after her joke, she asked me if I would swap with her. She, for the morning, and I for the afternoon. I restrained myself not to laugh. Of you. I pretended to check the schedule carefully, reached for my phone and pretended to check something on it and on the schedule. After a while of this scene, I said that unfortunately I could not. I have a dental appointment that I can't reschedule. She sighed heavily and turned back to the computer. And all you had to do was not be a mean-spirited wimp. Story 99. Someone else's story reminded me of this, but this happened back in university. One of my classes had a quarter-long group project that made up most of our final grade. The professor had check-in deadlines, but we were expected to manage our own timeline. My group of 4 decided we would all have roles with different responsibilities on top of our writing sections to keep us organized. I want to say the roles were editor, secretary, tech, and leader, but it was something similar. One guy chose secretary, which had pretty simple jobs: keeping notes from meetings, keeping track of sources, etc. The problem was that he always found some reason to miss the weekly group meetings, so all his tasks fell to us. He then blamed us when he missed deadlines, claiming we didn't tell him when they were. He would know if he bothered to check the meeting notes where we kept a running timeline. Technically, was his responsibility to update. Whatever writing he did contribute was procrastinated garbage, and the rest of us would have to scramble to redo his sections. We spoke with the professor to see if we could switch team members, but it was a small seminar, so no one else was available. She told us to work it out between ourselves. I tried to talk to him about it, but he always came up with some excuse and nothing changed. Story 99. Finals week comes around, and as expected, his section was an unfinished mess. What finally made me snap was so insignificant it sounds silly. He had edited the title page and changed the author order so his name was first. I was the editor, so I would do the last round of proofreading and formatting before turning things in. When I saw his name listed first, after I spent most of the night rewriting his part, I lost it. So the last thing I did before saving and turning in the final report was completely remove his name from the document. I later realized I should have asked the other 2 group members before doing it, but who hasn't given in to a toxic impulse close to midnight? My professor eventually contacted me to ask what happened, and I just explained that he didn't contribute, so including his name would be academic dishonesty. My university was very strict about any kind of cheating or plagiarism, so I knew those were the magic words. I didn't get a reply from her, but I know he got a bad grade because he was blowing up our group chat blaming us all. I ended up blocking his number, and thankfully didn't run into him again. TLDR. Slacker group member contributes nothing but tries to take first authorship, so I delete his name from the final draft before turning it in. Story 100. Joined a rec football league on Saturday. First time in 2 years playing a rec sport, so I'm mediocre, but it's a B tier, play for fun league. This day. As usual, there is always that one guy who takes everything too seriously. At one point, I heard the guy tell someone else they needed to replace me at cornerback as I'm too slow and not good enough, despite us only being down by 14-13 in the second quarter after I got outrun. Knowing the position is tough, instead of talking shit back to him, which is what I was about to do, since he's my teammate and I have 9 weeks left with him, I subbed out and told him to take my spot. The guy ended up letting off 2 touchdowns in 3 plays. After he got beat on the second TD, I hopped back in and said, "You trying to play corner?" Which he replied with, "No, it's fine, you can." He then proceeded to throw 4 picks as a QB in the third and fourth quarter, leading us to a 42-32 loss. We may have lost, but seeing him be the big reason we lost made it hurt less. Story 101. My stepmother and I had a contentious relationship. truly living up to the fairy tale tropes. As an abused child who was terrified of retribution if I spoke or acted out of line, I always behaved as best I could. Until The Half-Blood Prince was released. I'm an avid reader and can read a book faster than most I know. My husband calls it one of my autistic superpowers. I love the Harry Potter series, as does my stepmother. So teenage me took great delight in reading the book the same day it was released, then gleefully calling my stepmom to blurt out, "Dumbledore dies." I let it sink in for a few minutes, then call back. When my biological father answers and tells me how upset she is, I tell him I need to apologize to her. He hands the phone over, and I yell out, "And Snape is the one WHO killed him," before hanging up again. That was literally the last time I spoke to her. I've since cut all ties with her and my biological father, but I still have a small amount of smug satisfaction in knowing that I ruined her day as my last-ditch, final, and only act of rebellion. Story 102. This is my post from Malicious Compliance where some people recommended this subreddit. It's definitely petty revenge, but also MC warning. Kinda gross. This is my first Reddit post. When I started writing, I somehow accidentally posted the first sentence as an AMAIDK, how? But here's the MC. I was probably about 10 years old and had an awful history of motion sickness. Really awful motion sickness. So bad that I threw up on a paddleboard. My family was going on a vacation because my parents had gotten a ton of miles and we were splurging going to England and Scotland. I'm from the US. After a couple days in London, we took a small Ryanair flight over to Scotland for a day or two. It was terrible, and a really small plane, so a lot of turbulence and other things. The whole flight, I was on the verge of throwing up and felt so awful. When the plane finally landed, it was super rough and an awful landing with a lot of stop-start on the brakes, which causes me to have really bad motion sickness. When it finally stopped, I was groaning, and we were asking the flight attendant for a bag. But since it was Ryanair, they took every cost-cutting measure, which included not having barf bags. I was about to throw up. My mom then asked to cut to the front so I could throw up off the plane, which the flight attendant thought was just us trying to cut the line, which wasn't far. We were in the middle/front of the plane, and the flight attendant just basically told us no, and basically said snobbishly to me to throw up, because she thought that I was faking. I held it in my throat, and when it was finally our time to go down the aisle, we were still in the top half of the plane, and the flight attendant who was rude was behind us. QMC. I barged down the whole aisle all the way to the front door. It wasn't a two-aisle plane, it was just the one in the middle. It was all over the floor, and there was no way to get to the front without stepping in the giant puddles of liquefied fish and chips. I don't think there was a back exit, as it was a small plane. I could be mistaken. So everyone behind me was trapped. I think they had to call a hazmat team because of the volume. Still unsure on the finer details because my parents said they thought they saw one going up, but this was a really long time ago. I still remember the jaw on the floor of the flight attendant as I trapped them. I definitely feel awful for all the people behind us, and it's almost definitely a common excuse to cut the line, but WTF Ryanair not giving out 1-cent bags and not letting me go past so I can throw up. This was many years ago, so there are many details that were certainly missed or forgotten. Edit. It's really ironic how with my history of awful motion sickness, I of course still have it really bad, I'm really into DCS and flight simulators in VR, which I feel should really cause me to be sick, but somehow I'm fine with it. I think it's definitely actual motion instead of visual, though I of course can get visual in certain cases. Story 103. Not something I was directly involved in, but such a pleasure to watch today. Earlier, I was out with my wife getting the grocery shopping in our local supermarket. There was a young family with the mom looking quite frazzled, getting their shopping in, and one of those couples pushing a trolley round. We live in an area where there are lots of folks working in finance, legal, and betting, and many couples fall into the dual income, no kids yet bracket. Lots of disposable income and an attitude to match. The supermarket has a bank of very expensive EV chargers, and they are always full. The DINKY couple were doing a self-scan shop and had their shopping bags already in their trolley. Anyway, on to what happened. The frazzled mom was getting her shopping, and her two kids were making a bit of a nuisance of themselves. Kids are kids, and sometimes shopping is boring. They went running around the cheese aisle and bumped the dinky couple's trolley. The man said something to the older kid and then berated the frazzled mum infant of everyone before walking off. The mum told her kids off, and the Chila appeared to behave. I say appeared, because as soon as the dinky couple had their backs turned, the older kid was slipping totally random things into their bags in their shopping trolley before dashing back to his mother. I passed the self-scan checkout to see the DINKY couple had been picked out for a check scan of their bags, and one of the items the kids had slipped in was one other item scanned. They were having to unpack everything onto a normal checkout to have everything scanned, and I heard him say, "I don't need corn plasters, and I certainly didn't put them into the bag. It must have been you." When you see kids less than 10 years old getting diamond quality, petty revenge like this, you know the world is still a good place. Story 104. Happened years ago, but I still find it funny. I worked for a mid-sized software company and became quite skilled at integrating our traditional software with newer components and platforms. I worked on a very lucrative project using these skills and developed a technique to make the integration process even better. Following that success, I wrote a project plan for making this integration technique a basic part of the products. I pointed out that one of our future product differentiations would be that our traditional products could be integrated into the new platforms with ease. At that time, we had a significant revenue stream from existing customers, which really funded the company. I was basically told I was an idiot by the fair-haired young CIO and his team of flunkies. No one wants to do that. I quietly got on with my job and began looking for alternatives. After a while, I was not in a horrible hurry to leave. I was hired by another company that recognized that application integration was a promising area, etc. After about 3 years, one of my old managers called me, just for a chat. He almost immediately started in with, "I know why you really left." Explaining further, he had just been to a big meeting where they were trying to decide what could be done to turn the company fortunes around. Revenue had fallen off the cliff because they had completely invested in the new product line, ignoring the existing customers and products. That out. They each received a packet at this meeting. Included in that was a brand new plan to develop a new integration method between the new product line and our traditional offerings. Yes, the one I'd created. The fair-haired CIO had indeed included my document in his Save the Company plan, neglecting to remove my watermark with the date. At that point, the plan was about 5 to 6 years old, and my name. I was giggling when told this. Then he asked, "I guess you don't want to come back to work for us, do you?" It seems that he was ordered to track me down and tempt me to come back. We both laughed. He said he was retiring soon, but figured it was worth a good laugh to call me. It was both sweet and sad, because I worked with some fine people there. Many were hurt by the various downturns, layoffs, and ultimate demise of what had once been a really good company. Edit. The revenge was the laughter, and the knowledge that the fair-haired CIO, for all his MBA and buzzword-infested crowd, got found out. Story 105. For over 20 years, I have hosted holidays at my place. My sister and her family moved out of state, but are close enough to come back for each holiday. Sounds great, right? Well, not so much. Sister and her family always go to her in-laws' place for the big meal, and since her MIL is not a great cook, they just pick at the food, then invade my place for leftovers, aka the entire meal afterwards. Now you're probably thinking, what's the big deal, right? Well, the big deal is that it's gotten to the point my recipe for mashed potatoes starts with a 10-pound bag of potatoes. The turkey barely fits in the oven. The sides take up the entire counter, and I use an entire quart of cream for just desserts. It's a huge undertaking, and not only does sister not contribute financially, she never even has the decency to let me know whether they are coming or when. This year I texted the family that my kids were going to make the meal for just us, and if anyone wanted to join us afterwards, I'd have dessert, and only dessert to share. As usual, I got a text from everyone else, but nothing from sister. Rather than trying to chase her down, I assumed she had gotten the message and went on with my plans. But the times comes, and the kids put on a lovely meal. We eat and enjoy ourselves, then pack up the leftovers. A few families showed up over the next hour, and we chatted happily. Then it happens. The car is pulling into the driveway. Sister's family has arrived. They invade in usual style, going round giving quick hugs before heading for the kitchen. It took less than 30 seconds before she's out, trying to be polite since there are still others there, to ask where the food is. Aren't the pies on the counter? The bread pudding is in the crock pot. The sauce is on the stove. Her. Yes, but where's the food at? At this point, the others are starting to catch on to what's up and trading glances. Me. I told everyone that we were only doing dessert. Did you not get the message? Her. You know we can't actually eat at Mel's house. We were counting on eating here before we drive back. Me. Well, I think there should be fast food open somewhere between here and your place. Her adult kids were trickling out of the kitchen at this point, looking around as if a turkey dinner is going to magically appear out of thin air, and everyone else is practically holding their breath, waiting to see what happens. She spewed some not nice comments about how they were probably not going to find anything open, and it was my fault they were going hungry, told the kids to grab something to eat in the cars, and stomped out. I don't know who lost their composure first, but I think it was my uncle who cracked and started laughing. Once we calmed back down, the rest of us had quite the nice evening enjoying just desserts. Story 106. This is a long one, but it was the best revenge story of my life so far. I'm a South African living in Japan, and I took my Japanese wife to meet my parents and have a honeymoon in South Africa. On the first of 3 flights back to Japan was from Joburg to Qatar. We take our seats and get settled in. I noticed that a lot of the passengers around us were wearing the same t-shirts, some kind of pharmaceutical company. As soon as we got settled in, I noticed that the woman and 2 men sat behind us were also employees of this company. As soon as they got settled in, I noticed she, let's call her Brandy, was quite chatty, loud, and a bit obnoxious. But I am a nervous flyer, so at the time, I was more worried about the takeoff than her. So I put my earpods on. And whoosh! We take off for our 8 hours flight to Qatar. As soon as the seatbelt sign switched off, Brandy started ordering brandy and cokes for herself and her 2 coworkers. As each drink came, Brandy's voice got louder, more obnoxious. After drink number 6, the topic of her conversation turns to relationships. By this time, half the cabin could hear their conversation about how she disapproves of interracial relationships. Even I could hear her through the guttural screams and face melting guitar riffs of Meshuggah blasting through my earpods. Then it happened. A nice woman sitting on 4 seats to her left quite loudly says, "Ma'am, could you please quiet down? You're a bit loud and I am trying to get some sleep." I heard it too, so paused the song and took out my left earpod to excitedly eavesdrop. Brandy was not happy. She says, "Excuse me, this isn't a nighttime flight. Haven't you heard of earplugs?" And then jumps straight back into her conversation. Tension in the air immediately changed. In that moment, all the people who heard the interaction caught eyes with each other, and we all knew this flight was about to get interesting. About 20 minutes later, a flight attendant comes and politely asks Brandy to quiet down a bit. She begrudgingly agrees, orders another round and quiets down. But it only takes Brandy about 30 minutes to get all the way back up to a volume louder than the jet engines rowing outside the windows. Then another Chinese woman from the other side of the cabin gets up and walks to where Brandy is sitting, and in her best attempt at English says, "Please be quiet, my child keeps waking up because of you." Brandy looks up and, you shit you not, asks this Chinese woman in very mispronounced Chinese, "Can you speak Chinese?" I'm fluent in Chinese, so I could understand what she was trying to say, and just kept repeating it until the frustrated Chinese woman went back to her seat. By this time, both flight attendants for our cabin were very much aware of Brandy's sassy nature and decided to close the bar for the whole cabin, which pissed me off because I was hoping to enjoy a few more whiskeys before we landed. A few minutes later, I hear sound of shuffling, then plastic, and then the faint sound of what sounds like the cap of a glass bottle being cracked open, then the sound of liquid being poured into cups. Yup. Brandy had opened her bottle of duty-free brandy she bought at the airport, and once again their conversation began to crescendo. Now, the whole time I had been spectating the Brandy situation, I wasn't really paying attention to my wife, who I assumed was sleeping next to me. I then saw my wife pull one of her earpods out, turned to try and get a look at Brandy through the crack in the seat, and then turned to look at me with a face I rarely see my wife make. It was a face of pure rage and frustration. I snapped. Now, usually I'm not the kind of person who likes to cause a scene, but I decided that I'm not going to let this asshole of a woman ruin my wife's flight. So like a crazy person, I stood up and announced loud enough that the entire cabin turned to hear me, "Excuse me, everybody, can I please have all of your attention? By show of hands, who of you would like these people to shut the fuck up?" About 30 passengers all around us raised their hands. I then turned to Brandy and just say, "Look, understand? Shut up." I sat back down to the sound of applause from all the passengers that were raising their hands. My wife was shocked that I did that, but I told her that I did it because I could see that Brandy was beginning to bother you too. She gave me a hug, and the flight attendant that saw what I did brought a cup of Coke, but slipped me 2 of those little bottles of whiskey. Thankfully, Brandy and the gang then passed out and were quiet for the rest of the flight, so my wife and I could relax. But Brandy wasn't finished, and now she had a new target. Me. On our descent, Brandy awakes and decides that she wants to play some cards on the entertainment screen attached to the back of my seat, trying her best to hit the buttons hard enough to make my seat move. I teach kids for a living, so I know that she is behaving like an angry toddler trying to get a rise out of me, so I ignore her. We land, the plane taxis off the runway, and everyone starts getting up to get off the plane. As soon as I get up and she sees my wife and she starts repeatedly insulting me about my weight and how I married an Asian woman because I can't get a real South African woman, blah, blah, blah. High school bully level bull's gut. I just smile and nod my head at everything she was saying and exit the plane. Finally, Brandy and her coworkers walk off, and my wife and I find a nice cafe to have a coffee and chill and stretch for a bit before we make our way to the next boarding gate for our second flight to Malaysia. Eventually get to the gate, and lo and behold, guess who's also flying to Malaysia? That's right, It's Brandy. She's standing by the gate window taking selfies and doesn't notice me. I find an empty seat next to a guy wearing the same pharmaceutical company t-shirt and say, "Excuse me, sir, that woman over there with blonde hair taking selfie, what's her name?" He asks me why, and I say that she looks like someone I used to go to high school with, but I wasn't sure and didn't want to make an ass of myself asking her directly. He tells me, and I say, "Oh, then it's not her, sorry." I thank him, and for the remainder of the wait at the gate, logged into the airport Wi-Fi, found their company's Facebook page and website, and sent a detailed recount of Brandy's behavior, being sure to include all the colorful things she was talking about with her coworkers. The next 2 flights back to Japan were uneventful and got home safe and sound. 2 weeks later, I get a reply from the CEO asking me for my number, as he would like to talk to me about what happened. He calls me and profusely apologizes for what Brandy put us through. Turns out that by the time Brandy landed in Malaysia, the CEO had seen my message, changed her return flight back to South Africa for the very next day, and fired her at arrivals in JHB Airport when she got back. I bought a bottle of brandy and Coke on my way home from work that day to celebrate with my lovely wife. Story 107. I just remembered this and thought to share it. And FYI, this story happened when I was around 18 or 19 years old. I lived in the UK, so drinking is legal at that age. My friends and I went to a club for some drinks one weekend. We were all having a good time and getting a bit tipsy. Well, as I went to get another drink from the bar, this guy barged into me with his shoulder. I could tell he was a bit drunk already and looking for trouble. I'm quite tall and fairly strong, so when he barged into me, I was unaffected. So he wanted to try again. But this is where he messed up. He took a step back, clenched his fists, lowered his body, and began to run towards me in an attempt to give himself enough momentum to make an impact. As he ran towards me, I pivoted my body 90 degrees and let all of the force he accumulated be released into the air behind me. He then loses his footing and falls into a group of girls. This was not my intention. I was only trying to avoid him in the moment. It was at this moment I stepped behind a pillar and peeked from behind it to see what happened next. Well, after he crash landed into them, chaos ensued. The girls started shouting at him and hitting him. The security guards appeared within 20 seconds to grab him and drag him away. All the while, he was looking around to try and find me, perhaps to put some kind of blame on me. After that event, I went on my way to get my drink, then back to my friends with this story. Story 108. I owned a small construction company. We did interior improvements in buildings. About 20 years ago, we were doing a fairly large job, and I had employed all of my usual subcontractors such as drywall, electric, and HVAC. One day I was on the job in shabby work clothes. I decided to do some cleanup as the job was getting cluttered. An electrician, an employee of my subcontractor, was doing the same. He didn't know me from Adam. At some point, I was standing out back near a dumpster that belonged to another tenant. We were not to use that one. For obvious reasons, the electrician walked up and dumped some of his trash in that bin. I politely informed him that this was not ours to use. His response was, "Ain't life a bitch?" And then he walked away. A minute or two later, he returned, dumping more trash in the bin. At that point, I told him, "This isn't ours to use, take it out." He looked at me with a moronic stare and said, "Who the FK are you?" I smiled and politely informed him that, "I'm the F King General Contractor, that's who I am," as he quickly retreated and started to apologize as he cleaned the trash out of the bin. For the rest of the job, it was like magnetic repulsion. He would be anywhere that I wasn't. A couple of weeks, he sheepishly apologized to me, to which I replied that you never know who you are talking to, so don't take a damn attitude. The guy was a worthless asshole, sort of a social project by his boss. I changed electricians shortly after that.